Thank you, Hassan. We know there is a ton of interest on digital twinning. That was a lot of great information to talk about in such a short amount of time. So Hassan will be here this week. I encourage you to reach out to him, ask questions, and continue that conversation if you're interested. As I mentioned earlier, we really want to take advantage of the thought leadership in Europe with respect to sustainability. So with that in mind, we've put together a panel to discuss the directives that are coming out of the EU and how they impact our industry, especially at a time when the demand for AI is driving significant growth in data center deployments. Oh, sorry. So please welcome me in joining our panel, and welcome me in having our panels come out with our moderator, Mark Acton.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a good time in Portugal so far. So our session today is to talk about some of the European regulations that are coming in, particularly EED, CSRD, etc. And I've got an esteemed set of panelists here to help me out on that. My particular involvement in this is I've been involved in the stakeholder meetings with the European Commission, so I have a little bit of insight, but as do my fellow panelists. With that said, I'd like to ask them to introduce themselves very briefly, who they are, the company they work for, and their interest in this particular subject. I'm going to start with you, Grégory.
Thank you, Mark. So Grégory Lebourg, I'm the Global Environmental Director for OVH Cloud, the #1 European player as a cloud service provider.
Thank you. Loren?
And Loren Long, I'm the co-founder of 3Tag, which is a digital carbon and circularity labeling platform to trace all the materiality through its life cycle.
Thank you. Rich?
My name is Rich Kenny. I'm the Managing Director at Interact. We specialize in hardware profiling and circular economy.
Thank you. And finally, Miranda.
Thank you. I'm Miranda Gardiner, the Executive Director for the iMasons Climate Accord. We are a nonprofit of 250 member organizations focused on decarbonization of digital infrastructure.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stay with you, Miranda, if I may.
Okay.
So we have this regulation coming in. We've got the EED coming in. We have to report in September 24. You know, that deadline is pretty rapidly approaching. You know, it's not just that the light's in the tunnel, it's coming towards us very fast. Are we ready?
Short answer, no. But not, I think mostly because there are so many variables going into this right now, and that concern about what we are going to get hit with financially or the inaccuracy of the data is creating a lot of churn and sort of concern for everyone who's in this audience and the market in the EU. So.
Agreed. And Grégory, I'm going to come to you from sort of more of a sort of data center specific operational perspective. Do you know what you need to report and how to report it?
Well, we do know I would say the global frame that they have set up, okay? And again, we need regulation, so it's not a dirty word to talk about that. But what we don't know for a fact is how we're going to be reporting it, okay? The type of KPIs, the way they should be calculated, against which standard should they be audited in the first place before they are released, and where do we put the data? So there was a call for action on the community by the European Commission to give some, I would say, comments on their proposal for this modus operandi, but so far it's not operational, I would say.
Yeah. So we're at the starting point, I think, aren't we, of this? Loren, to that point, talking about what we are required to be issuing in terms of data and reporting, they've tried to make it standards-based. You know, do you think that's worked? I mean, they are referencing 5600 and 30134 to a degree.
Well, I think there's several competing, if you will, models. And you know, if you look at, you know, depending on whether you're looking at scope 2 or scope 3, and you know, the Greenhouse Protocol and ISO has some circular references. There's other standards that play into it. But then even when you talk about, we were talking about this yesterday about, you know, let's get scope 2 right. Yeah. There's so many permutations of who owns which part, and I think the first few years of reporting are going to highlight the disparity between, you know, if you've got a full stack, then you've got the whole thing. If you're a colo operator with enterprises and clouds, who reports which and who owns what? And I think we're going to see the first couple of years everybody working out the best methodology, because the other thing is it inherently drives towards a comparison. Right. And you have to have a level and fair reporting standard for people to be compared.
And I think that's where standards come in, isn't it? You know, the fact that it creates a level playing field. At the moment, let's face it, sustainability reporting is a bit, I'm going to be favourable here, haphazard, I think would be the word I would use. so I think having standards-based reporting is clearly a good step forward. To that point, Rich, ITEU. You know, all of a sudden, we've got a situation where the co-location providers in particular are having to report on IT utilisation. How's that going to go?
I think it's going to be really tricky. I think utilization, Uptime said that 40% of enterprises and data centers are reporting on utilization. I think that's a horseshit figure. Like no one is anywhere near 40%. Like that, people that actually track utilization in the terms of ITEU, how it must be tracked, which is over a yearly average, accounting for peaks, troughs, and at CPU and memory level. The number of people I know that are doing that, it's very limited. It's very, very limited. The people that are doing it well and could report on it transparently, it's a tiny number. To put that onto a colo, when I think even the enterprise who have complete ownership of the kit don't do it, I think it's really tricky. But I also don't know where you start and where you draw the line with it, because understanding ITEU is important. I think ITEE is more important. I think the actual efficiency of the kit is more valuable than how you're using it. I think that's what you layer on top of it. I think you have step one, step two. But even having that metric and having it necessary to be reported on by a colo it's going to cause pushback. It's going to cause pushback because if the enterprise isn't doing it and they're expecting the colo to do it, the colo's not going to take responsibility for it. I just don't see them doing it. Even the best ones aren't. My understanding is that the majority of hyperscalers couldn't tell you what the utilization is per data center, and they're in complete control of the kit and the assets that they sit on with it. So it's tricky, but it needs to be done. So much as I'm saying it's hard, someone has to draw a line in the sand, and I think that's what the EED does, is draw that line and go, this needs to be reported.
Well, I mean, it's mentioned in the regulation, isn't it? We ultimately don't have a choice. And how many IT departments, how many people responsible for the IT piece do you think have even heard of ITEU?
I think it's limited. I think in certain regions it's more known. I think about like with the Dutch government and the Netherlands, with Leap, for example, they make a big part around power modes and how you're using the equipment. But you go to any other enterprise and it's, people don't even have like accurate asset inventories of what kit they've got, let alone how they use it. The number of times you go into an organization and say, do you know what servers you've got? And if they gave you a list, it would have networking switches on it and laptops and all sorts of stuff. If they can't get that very basic level of IT inventory, asking them to then layer on complicated stuff like EU, no, they don't know about it. They probably willfully don't want to know about it as well, because it's hard and it makes someone's job a lot more difficult. So I'm quite excited about some of the legislation that comes out on this, because we provide a clear metric of this is how you do it. Now go and do it. And at some point somewhere, a bottom's going to have to get smacked if they don't. And we need to define where that is most appropriate to get us back bottom, though, at this point in time.
And moving back to yourself, Miranda, on that, what do you think the EU is going to do? And we had a sort of slight discussion around this. Rich is talking about the big stick, the penalties that are going to come from this. How do you think that's going to develop over time? Not just actually in the EU, but globally as well. What are we going to see?
Well, that's what we were talking about yesterday, and what Loren just mentioned in terms of baselining. If we have a stringency like we're seeing coming out of the EU with international companies applying either their design standards for the actual facility of the data center or otherwise within the IT hardware, now they're going to meet this regulation, and so ultimately it's going to impact what they're doing on that global scale. And so it would create a problem if we're going to do one way for the EU and then one way for North America, rather than just lining up their standards. For me, I come from the built environment side. I'm an architect by training, and sustainability is really my focus. And so to look at the entire supply chain, when you can line it up correctly and accurately so everyone knows their role in this, now you're more efficient, now you're savings on cost, on timeline to delivery, which we know is one of the huge issues going on right now, just getting everything out into market. And so, in my mind, if you don't follow what's going on in the EU and then apply it strategically through the rest of your portfolio or work, you're going to be at your own loss. It's your own risk there.
So it's very much the EU taking a lead on this, and the rest of the world's pretty much A, watching, and B, potentially following.
At present, yeah, absolutely.
Grégory, back to you. I mean, obviously, as an operator, do you see penalties coming, or do you think it's going to be a slow burn from the EU? Do you think they're going to, collect the data, analyze that data, and then probably toughen things up as they go along?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's the first step that they are taking, just to see if if it's feasible from an operational standpoint, if the accuracy of the data is there, if the exhaustivity as well of the data is there. And then they will probably take some more steps to push people. And financially, it's a good way to push people, right? But I think more interestingly, what they will be doing is that probably they will widen the scope of the regulation. As you've seen, if you heard me during the keynote, it's a multifactorial thing.
Yeah.
The impact of the environment, the impact on the environment of our industry. So they are pretty much focusing on energy efficiency today. They will probably put some more pressure on the carbon footprint, but they will not forget hydric stress. So I'm sure that they are cooking up something as far as the water consumption, which is, by the way, done at a local level already because of water scarcity. But these are, temporary measures that they are taking locally, but I'm sure that they will probably set a frame more globally for the industry. The use of abiotic resources as well. Yep. Definitely, they will put some pressure on the eco-circularity here and there. They've started already with the waste heat reuse and all the legal frame that they are thinking about. So again, this is just probably the first wave, and there is a tsunami coming, I would say.
I've heard exactly the same thing directly from the policy officers at the Commission, that they are starting gently. They don't want to break the industry, but at the same time, they will collect data, they will build it up, and it will get tougher. There's no question. I don't see penalties immediately. I don't know about you, Loren, if you're seeing the same thing.
No, actually, I think we will see. So we've talked about the EED, but let's also bring in the CSRD, the CSRD, which I still don't think has been fully voted on.
Not yet, no.
It was supposed to be. They're running a little behind. And then the greenwashing law. And you start bringing all of that together. And right now, people talk about the CSRD, and the focus is on scopes 1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
And we haven't even talked about scope 3. We'll talk about that in a second. But actually, it also covers the social. It covers the governance. Everything is and it says report on it. Now, when you bring in the CSRD, it says take responsibility for your reporting and reduce the effect. And it does bring in the liability. So if you're a company that has done full due diligence of your power, full due diligence of your supply chain, and you understand all those, you now have the responsibility to either mitigate, fix, or eliminate those portions of your supply chain or value chain. And that's a consequence, not just the government, but it's the commercial consequence. We were talking yesterday, some of these things are becoming commercially weaponized, and that's as much a consequence as anything.
Yeah, that weaponization of ESG, I think, is something that people increasingly talk about. It really is. And dare I say at the moment, despite the fact that it's weaponized, I wouldn't say it's particularly transparent. I don't know what you think, Rich.
No, I think transparency is the number one issue in all of this. And it's really important for reporting, because we go back and say, if we agree what the metrics look like, when we agree what good looks like, how much can you game it to look good without being good? And it's why I really struggle with the term net zero and the race to net zero, because I feel like the race to net zero ruins the concept of net zero reporting, because how quick can we get there? You're massively incentivized to fudge your numbers. And until we have that level of transparency that says this is what good reporting looks like, this is what good maths look like, this is what a good mechanism looks like, and that's what I think we really lack, is that interjoint piece that says this is what good looks like, not from the end piece, but in every step of the process.
Yep.
That's why transparency is so important, because I can tell you that we are zero carbon today, and if you don't check my numbers, I've just won the race to net zero, congratulations. But the second you dig into that and go, this is rubbish, it's a big problem. And we're seeing a lot of major enterprises, and we work with huge enterprises who are having to recalculate previous year's emissions based on new knowledge.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of it's new knowledge and how much of it is stuff that we can't get away hiding anymore. So that element of transparency is, can we be honest and open and say that we're not doing well, and then get better.
Or
And
how we're
that's what-
slicing the pie. I mean, I just was reading a report where it's like talking about the transmission. I can't remember exactly, and there's like a little star. And if you look at it, then it's like what we have control over. But they didn't even clarify from that. So it's like anyone who is seeing this and who is not familiar with the space like we are is thinking, oh, this company is doing wonderfully, to your point. They're there, they've done this. And any of us reading it are like, you're not even close to this. Like, I mean, like you're a percent of a percent of a percent, but it looks nice from kind of a greenwashing marketing approach to the work. Yeah.
Well, can I? I'm
Yeah,
gonna throw,
absolutely. Go
I'm going
ahead.
to throw it back to Rich for a second because you've done some really fascinating research. And it's not just fudging the numbers or getting it wrong. There are methodologies that simply don't square. If you're using an input-output or, you know, weights and measures or, you know, it's like everybody could be right and nobody agrees. And you've even done studies on vendors, and we won't call anybody out necessarily, but they're offering their EPD, and it looks nothing like the box they just sold. So how do we fix that?
Yeah, that's a really good example on that when we talk about LCA, and there's some super smart people here today who can tell you a lot more about life cycle carbon analysis than I can. But exactly what you're talking about, you know, I will say it with, like, you know, Dell are really good at trying to provide an LCA, but even they've revised their LCAs on the same box. So one day the R740 was 1.5 tons of embodied carbon. Next time you check, it's 640 for the same unit. And you go, what have you done? It's like, oh, we've removed some storage elements. We've removed where we're producing it. We've lowered our carbon footprint in our factories. And you're like, you can't just change the number. Like, you can't just do that. But right now you can. And that's that transparency we want, is stop changing the numbers, just put the flag down.
Absolutely. And Grégory, on to you on that. I mean, doesn't that just validate the importance of standards generally,
Yeah,
and how we use them?
Certainly, but again, this is a learning process, right? This carbon accounting, just to talk about carbon accounting, but we could extend it to water as well accounting. It's not as easy as financial accounting. And I'm sure we were not there, but maybe 150 years ago, the accountants would have the same debate on how do we report the gross margin, the net profit, or whatever. So, except it's a bit easier, I would say, than doing the math with the physical reality, which is sometimes blur. So let's say that we are learning and we are improving year over year. So being inaccurate year N doesn't prevent you from restating your numbers when you do the reporting on year N+1, number one. But something that we shouldn't be doing is to be blind. And you're talking about life cycle analysis. There are a number of chip manufacturers, they are not disclosing the numbers. I mean, they've got the means to do it. I mean, that's just building block of the system, right? So we need proper LCA analysis from them in full transparency. And they can restate, because it would be wrong.
Well,
But they should do something. And I think we work a lot with public sector organizations, and I get a lot from Cisco who just won't publish LCAs.
Yeah.
And you just go, you can't just not. Like, if everyone else is doing it, we talk about a level playing field, some people don't even want to play the game. And I think that's the important piece, is this legislation says everybody has to play. And that's what I think is really important.
But Miranda, I think they're being increasingly marginalised. Those people who won't play the game, I think, are being called out increasingly.
Yes and no, because there's someone in the audience who we were on a panel a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about why we think this is stalling out. And it's not because of the data, in my opinion, or even the kind of excess of it. It's really the economics of this. Yep. And so is the penalty less than doing all the hard work that you need to do to get there? Is it, by not reporting, going to benefit you in the long run because, say, another market doesn't really care about it? Are you undercutting, you know, your competitor in this space? And so when that is still the driving force, all the rest of this doesn't matter. And so, unfortunately, we're going to have to make it much more economically beneficial or restrictive to force the issue.
Loren, I know you've got a view.
I have an
on
opinion
it.
there.
You have you've got several opinions, but this one in particular.
You know, and I'm gonna quote the guy who said it just last week to Miranda's point. So John Booth very eloquently said, regulation is the consequence of a failed market.
Yep.
So the inability, and I'm not saying anyone has the inability or lacks the motivation to regulate themselves, but that's when government steps in and says, no, you're not doing it right. And I think to the commercial aspect, that's the benefit, if you will, of regulation is it says, no, I'm going to make it more expensive for you to not do it the right way. So it now becomes cheaper. And I think, one of the other things we're talking about LCAs, I think actually if you look at the carbon contribution between the tiers, and depending on the industry, obviously, but as much as 50% of the scope 3 can be 4 tiers into your value chain. And that's my point is, I think LCA methodologies have to change because expecting a vendor to look 4 vendors deep into a supply chain and for her to figure out exactly what that's near impossible.
Well, and to your point earlier, we haven't even got scope 2 right yet, which is relatively easy. Scope 3, as you say, that the depth down the supply chain is, at the moment, frankly, impossible. We're getting better, but it's a long way away. Grégory, back to you. We don't particularly like regulation, obviously. None of us do. But at the same time, does it give us a roadmap in terms of the direction of travel of where we need to go? Does it actually give us something that we can work to? We may not be perfect. Because a lot of people are saying to me, we don't particularly want regulation, but actually we do want a direction of travel. We want to understand where it's going and prepare for that.
No, I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
No, let's take the example at the European level. I'm sorry, Mark.
Okay.
There is a self-regulation initiative in Europe, the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact.
Yeah.
Okay. And this one is, multifactorial, for example. You talk about power efficiency, you talk about reasonable use of water, you talk about reusing waste heat, and so on and so forth. And you talk about normalizing, standardizing the reporting. It's a self-regulation initiative. It took a while, for all the parties to get together and come up with a compromise. But it's far in advance compared to the bit of regulation which is popping up today. So we don't need the regulatory body to give us, I would say, a compass and set the directions. We need them to be synchronized with us, I would say.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. The climate neutral, I think personally that particular horse bolted a long time ago, with EED and CSRD coming in. And Loren, I don't know what you think.
No, that's not been my anecdotal experience in the market. Because now if OVH Cloud is doing all the right things, measuring everything, spending the money to do the greenest possible solutions, et cetera, that's a cost. And a lot of the vendors that I know that we were talking about, they simply either don't have the funds, the expertise, or the willingness to bring the accuracy, and we have to level the playing field for honest.
And we have the standards to work to.
Yes.
We've got the 30134 standards, ISO 30134. We're not even using those. I don't know why we need, a self-regulatory body when we're not even using what's available. And in terms of calculating things, well, WUE, it's defined by an ISO standard. PUE is defined by an ISO standard. And yet people are still gaming it. They're not even using the standards. Rich, I think we're in violent agreement.
Yeah, we are massively in agreement here, Mark. For me, it's the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact. It's not worth the paper it's printed on for the most part, in my view. I think we've got a wealth of metrics from the European Code of Conduct, which I think is excellent. They're mirrored directly into the EED, realistically, with some small changes, as far as we know. This year is the first year I've had customers come to me and ask for reporting on IT energy efficiency. That has been a metric in play for 12 years now.
Yep.
So for 12 years, ITEE has been one of the most important benchmarks for a data center. And for 12 years, I've never heard somebody ask for it. And then this year alone, because of the Energy Efficiency Directive, I have hundreds of inquiries around how do we properly do this. And this is major corporations that you think would have a handle on this, and they don't, because it's been voluntary. And now they're going, heck, how do I do this? So for me, I think regulation's not great. But what we have in this industry is a massive negative externality in that we do, as a data center industry, some wonderful things and provide, the backbone of technology, but we also don't pay for our mess sometimes. And I think that negative externality in economic terms, we're not been made to pay for that. And I think that's what needs to happen to move this industry forward, because I think the way we approach sustainability as an industry, the way we approach power utilization, all these things, I think it's really good. And I think we've got a lot to be proud of in the industry, but we do not pay for our own mess in a lot of cases, and we need to fix that. And I think we're at the point now where we've not done it voluntarily.
Yep.
So we need somebody, and I come back to this all the time.
Back to Loren's point. And Miranda, I think as the data center industry, I think we've focused a lot on the building, and I guess to Rich and Loren's point, we haven't necessarily focused particularly on the IT. Do you think that's changing, and do you think we're right to move away from deciding how many angels can dance on the head of a data center rather than actually move into the IT load?
Not yet. Only because all of this has to go together. I mean, we're looking at 2030 is not that far away, and that's most organizations' kind of benchmark, timeline for this work. So, in terms of all of the component parts that have to go forward, the building is not still there, the site is still not there. To kind of make a plug for the iMasons, our State of the Industry report was released this last week. It gets into power, people, perception, planet, all of the factors that have to come along for this to be successful. And the accountability piece that you're mentioning here and the responsibility, it is still there. It doesn't matter what the level or how small or how large it is. We really are responsible as an industry to do this, and we can do it together. I mean, that's, to me, we are in this together. Let's not point fingers. Let's not kind of accuse somebody of doing something they're not doing, or, again, our competitor undercutting us. Okay, collectively, bring the bargaining chips to the table, commit to these actions, and let's move forward, because I do think we can hit these targets. Yeah?
That's and it's not just about energy efficiency, is it? There's a great deal more in there. Grégory, I think you were sort of...
Yeah, I think we're forgetting someone in the room, the end customers. Right? Because we are talking about our industry under the spotlight. So just picture ourselves in an ideal world where our PUE will be as close as possible to 1. Our WUE will be close to 0, not to say 0. We would be reusing the waste heat perfectly. We would put in place circularity to reuse the components, have a longer lifespan of those components. But still, we are using resources, right?
Absolutely.
But we are not. Our customers are using resources. So they should be frugal on their hand as well, okay? And to be frugal, we need to give them information as far as the impact of the services that they subscribe with us. So carbon calculator, for example, or water calculator, or whatever type of calculator at the service level on a monthly basis or on a yearly basis would be an interesting information for them so that they can make up their mind, arbitrate, stop some non-necessary workloads, optimize stuff, not only on a cost perspective, but an environmental footprint perspective.
Absolutely, and I don't just think it's customers of data centers. I think all of us, the general public, have a responsibility to understand the impact of our digital choices, our digital service choices.
Yeah.
Well, the media is going to cane us if we don't. Go on, Loren.
No.
Disagree, love it.
All right, so let's draw a correlation between the oil and gas industry and the data center industry, and the full stack.
Yeah.
So we'll leave us aside for a second. The oil and gas industry itself does not cause
Correct.
CO2, environmental CO2. It is everybody driving their cars or consuming goods created from the energy powered by or eating the food. So, you look at people who are protesting oil and gas, they probably drove to the protest in a car.
But
it's
how
the
else
consumption.
are they supposed to do that? I mean, especially in North America. This is an unfair argument, in my opinion, because we have set this up. Auto industry working with oil and gas, putting consumers into the car, and then being like, you are the problem.
Yep.
Down the supply chain, even though it supported all of our business moves here. We don't have the train network that we've got in Europe. I mean, again, I think that's why it's like all these kind of combined pieces cause problem. I don't disagree with you that the consumer has to be more aware of this, but to kind of point the finger that the consumer did that.
No, I'm not. Well, the finger that I'm saying is it's not simply educating the consumer, because I think everyone who drives a car realizes that combustion creates CO2.
They do now.
You don't think so?
They didn't know. They didn't know. They know now. I hope they
Well, I'm
know
talking
now.
about now.
But until recently, they didn't know.
Yeah. I think that's where I'm going. I think we need to educate the public about their choices actually impact, what happens in our industry. I've got a final question. We've got about a minute and 30 seconds left. I'm going to start with you, Miranda.
Okay.
What do you think is going to what is going to change over the next 3 to 5 years in terms of regulation or legislation? And I don't just mean in Europe, I mean globally. Where do you see it going? The 3 to 5 year impact.
It's been brought up a couple of times on this stage, and again, this is shameless plug for us and for the OCP, is the more we see partnerships going together, and there's a session tomorrow about the work that the iMasons and the OCP are doing. It's our first work stream as part of this partnership, and it includes colleagues and experts of mine and the OCP from Google, from Meta, from Schneider Electric, and from Microsoft, working together to look at this carbon disclosure and how we do this together. And then you heard the startup panel before this. Moog is in the mix. I mean, we have 80+ companies getting involved in that engagement on top of what we're doing with the Climate Accord. I mean, the more partnerships that we can bring and work on this together, again, the better off we're going to be. I can't say this enough. It's a team sport. Nobody's doing this alone.
Thank you. Rich?
Looking at all the systems and looking at all the impacts. So I think it'll be that understanding. At the moment, we're heavily energy and carbon focused. The next 3 to 5 years, I think we'll move further into social and combine environmental, like we talked about with water and things. I think it will become a whole combined offering of value versus cost. And I think quantifying that will be what the next 3 to 5 years looks like.
Yeah, thank you.
I think the two biggest things is going to be the breakdown of walls in the value chain. We can't reach these regulatory reporting requirements without sharing transparently. And I think another part of that is I see offsets. We saw a little argument about that 2 weeks ago with a certain body. I think offsets are going to go away because it completely clouds the ability to accurately and transparently measure.
Yeah. Finally, Grégory?
So we talked about the tsunami which is coming in front of us in terms of globally the regulation of our activity. I see an earthquake coming up as far as artificial intelligence. I think it's going to be the next move.
We didn't even touch on that one.
No, but this one is...
We could do another hour.
I'm sure that the regulatory bodies will tackle that issue soon.
I think you might be right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. And thanks for your attendance. Thanks for listening. Thank you.